There's things that I think I talked about preparing for my AT through hike was footwear and considering a lot of different silly options. Ultimately, I ended up taking and wearing the Terex from Adidas, and they were Gore-Tex, and I thought they had great tread. And I ended up switching out the laces for this bungee quick lace system, which was a mistake, and also not ordering them a size big enough and sizing up. And what I found out is that I couldn't get the shoelaces tight enough to keep my heel back in the shoe, and I had a lot of toe issues starting out. I appreciate the Gore-Tex going through Georgia and North Carolina, Tennessee in March. The weather did definitely get cold. There wasn't as much water as far as rain, but precipitation in the form of snow and ice. And I think these performed well as far as the Gore-Tex goes. And I know that's kind of a big no-no among thru hikers, but I would say this pair of shoes that I bought in Hot Springs were these Topos. These particular ones right here. And it was my first time buying those. I ended up taping, I think, the toe up and maybe putting some, I think it was, I had some shoe goo or something on there because they did start coming across apart on the toe. And other than that, these held up for over 800 miles. So I think I replaced these with another pair of Topos that I ordered online and had delivered to Duncannon. And I think it was around 800 miles or more on those particular shoes, and those really held up well. So that sold me right there. So from Duncannon, where I had a pair of shoes, the same ones delivered to me, the Topos Ultra Adventure or Ultra Venture 3s in the same color. I wore those all the way through, and maybe those had the most miles on them, from Duncannon to Manchester, Vermont. And I'm kind of upset that I threw them out. But I went into the outfitter in Manchester and they had Hoka's. And wide version, I believe, 10.5 2E. So wide and light, comfortable. Bought these in Manchester and then had a medical issue that weekend and had to get off trail. So I actually have no trail miles on these, and the creation I'm having right now. And I do like the comfort, but I don't know if there's a lot of stability in the waist of it. And we're still. Now I did have another pair of shoes when I went back to trail. So I got off in Manchester and then went ahead and ended up getting back on in Gorham, New Hampshire. But I did buy a pair of New Balance hiking shoes, sneakers, that had great tread, and I did like the way they felt. They were comfortable, they were cushioned, and hiked with those through the end of New Hampshire, Mahoosic Notch and whatnot. But I was having a lot of issues around my heel because I also, in retrospect, made a mistake changing out my footwear and socks without a lot of hiking experience with those. So went to a low cut sock and tried to limit the amount of gear that I was taking and changed out my shoes and ended up having a lot of blisters around my heel. But not my heel, my ankle bone. And that really had put quite a sore spot into my whole hiking plans. So when I got to Monson, those were actually falling apart and had to switch those out and bought some Mount Block Ultras from Poet at his shop in Monson. And I did end up hiking southbound from there. I didn't end up doing the 100-mile wilderness or hiking Katahdin because I Didn't think that I had the time to do that. So I actually turned around southbound and hiked back to Caratonk in these. And I just had to, so they don't have very many miles on them. I just had to take some super glue and glue down this black piece, which just seems to be a layer on top for the grip of the cushion part. So I'm not so sure these would hold up. However, they are super light. They would dry out easy. And that is something else I'm considering. So that's number 5 on the list. I'm obviously not going to go back to the Adidas, but that's number 4. Lastly, I did buy these Brooks Cascadia 18s. These are great sneakers as far as the grip goes, the comfort. The model is Extra Butter, so they worked in conjunction with Extra Butter, which is, I believe, a trail company out in Oregon, and they came up with these. Now they're no longer, there was only a limited release, and I actually have 2 pairs of these because the first ones I bought were, I believe, 10s. Yep. And these are 10.5 because I was looking for some more room in the toe box. Now I've wore these for phys ed all year, these particular pair, and they're starting to rip out. So they're ripping out on the side right here. And these are the larger of the 2, so I don't think this would be a wise choice to wear any further. And they're also ripping out inside of the heel. So I did try to look online to see if I could get another pair of those because I really enjoyed wearing those, but it doesn't look like I can get them. They're no longer available. So more than likely, and these I've also wore, I actually wore on Katahdin last year, are the other Topos Ultra Venture 3s that I've had and wore quite a bit, and they're wearing out tread right now. So I'm not so sure those would be the wise choice to start with. So I've looked into buying another pair of shoes, the 150 for the Ultra Venture 4s, which just came out. But I think to save money, I'm just going to go with the Hokas and see how those hold up. And there's always an opportunity, at least in Vermont, where I can get sneakers. Maybe not so much in New Hampshire. So those are my shoe options. Video when I was looking at shoe wear, it was quite hilarious. And even looking back in my preparation videos and how I was preparing my gear and what I thought was important and what I actually found to be important. So I'm going to go over my cook systems. I do carry a multi-tool. I'm going to go over that stuff as well as my electronics pack because I've switched out those and I think there's a considerable amount of difference with electronics. The utility knives that I've carried are the multi-tools, and my cook system has changed over a little bit. So we'll go over that. And just as a review, I was carrying the Atmos AG 65, and without the brain on it, I believe it might be more around 55 liters. This pack has seen better days, but it's held up pretty well. The only thing that's broke off of it was the trekking pole attachment where you could store away your trekking poles in one of these loops over here and then bungee to your shoulder straps. And I really found that to be very useful. And I also like these loops on your shoulder straps so you can hook things to them. Water bottle attachments. My GoPro is on one of them, and I really found that to be useful. In the pockets in the back, the stretchy pockets where you could just reach back, shove a water bottle in and up through that without having to take your pack off, I found super useful. But this is a considerable amount heavier and more durable maybe than this, which is coming from Ultralight Gear, ULA circuit, and has similar features, but they're not as user-friendly, I think. But it is a lot lighter. I've set it up with my water bottle attachments. I've changed out the GoPro holder. This is what I've seen Homemade Wonderlust wear in one of her videos, and it looked like it was going to be lighter than the other gator clip attachment, which has some other features on it. I mean, it's nice to have, but it seems to be maybe a little bit more heavier, and it does have a magnet on it, so you can, clip it to your GoPro and then put it on like something metal to keep it stationary. But I found that maybe this is going to be lighter, and have just switched that out recently. So that's going to be something else. And the way that I pack my bag is now going to be different because of the different features of the circuit. So instead of packing my bear can inside of the pack, which it will fit, I've decided that I'm going to strap it to the bottom of my bag. And instead of putting my not my sleeping bag, but my tent, instead of stuffing my sleeping tent in the bottom compartment of the Atmos, which opens up at the bottom for quick access, I am going to be stuffing my tent into the paracords on the back. So that is something else that I've been looking at, considering, fooling around with, testing. Now, some gear that I've switched out or I am taking may be something else that I didn't take on previous hikes. For example, a umbrella. Now, I did buy this G4 free umbrella before my thru hike and decided that wasn't something I needed. And I'm not quite sure it is something I need now, but I am potentially going to take that in its stuff sack in a side pocket and see if that is something that lasts or I even need. Now, I feel were times where I was either sitting down or maybe stationary or trying to get out of the rain for a short time, and there wasn't any cover available. So that is something I'm still considering taking. Likely I will be, just to see how it performs and if it's something I really need. The rain is nonstop, it seems like, in Vermont, and it's something I'm trying to mitigate as much as possible. The other 2 or 3 pieces of rain gear I have my rain skirt from Lightheart Gear, I believe it is. I have a Sea to Summit Ultrasil pack cover that I used on my pack, and I believe it should be something that fits over the circuit. I did waterproof the circuit as much as possible, and I have my wrap rain jacket. So those complete my rain gear, and I'm also potentially going to take a hammock tarp for additional rain protection when I set up my tent. But it would also serve as potentially a ground cover. Still taking my Mountain Hardwear long sleeve shirt to protect from the bugs, and my $50 puffy that was or is an Eddie Bauer down puffy large. Now it's probably a little bit bigger than I need to have, but I am going to take those 2 items as well. In addition to my Brooks running shorts, my Darn Tough socks, and a couple pairs of Smart Wool boxers. And I think that should complete. I am taking a base layer, just because I always feel like that is something I want to be able to fall back on. Have dry camp clothes. I tried the Nemo Tensor 20-inch wide sleeping pad. I believe it's insulated. It is small, packs down small, but it is not something that I felt comfortable in, and I ended up changing that out this year. I went back to the Sea to Summit Etherlight XT. However, I ordered the long pad, the long rectangular pad, versus the regular rectangular pad. I am just going to use the long one and carry that weight, whatever it is, a couple ounces, and see how that performs. Bougier items. One was a Flextail pump, and that I'll show a picture of. Had a charger on it, had a light, and also was used as a pump, and that weighed, I believe, 5 or 6 ounces. And it was nice to get to camp and not have to blow up your pad. I also used it to fan and stoke some fires. The light I did use in my tent occasionally, but I ended up in Buena Vista, if you're jukebox. And I've traded that out for the 1.2 ounce mini pump. So that was the first thing that I really wanted to still carry because I do enjoy that, and wanted to go a little bit lighter because I thought it was unnecessary. So I did blow up my pad the rest of the way, and it is kind of exhausting when you get into camp and having to do some of those things in addition to getting dinner and taking care of your chores. Another item that I carried through 1,600 miles or more was the Leatherman P4, and I did use this quite a bit. I used the pliers, I used the knives, I used the screwdrivers, I used the scissors, but this is an excessive amount of tools and weight that is probably unnecessary. Now, I'm still a fan of the multi-tool and was looking for something lighter, and I've racked my brain around different things. I do enjoy just a straight blade. I've considered a general pocket knife and utility knife but there's a lot of things on here that may potentially come in handy, but are probably unnecessary, and then some that are just too small to be effective. So I did want to stay away from that. I ended up choosing the Gerber Stakeout, which is kind of funny. I think it's kind of a gimmick. They had a stake puller on it, and I think that I've taken that off. So here's the stake puller that was on it. You can flip it up, hook it around your stake, and pull it out. But I thought that to be unnecessary because the carabiner is something that functions similar. They have tweezers on them, or has tweezers on them that aren't necessarily, I think, quality enough to be effective. There's a couple other things on here that I found that I would want, and that is a straight blade for sure. For 100% like the straight blade. The other thing that I thought was necessary for me is I do enjoy the scissors for any repairs, sewing, cutting, and I did use those to repair a number of different things, cut some things, including string, which is sometimes a little bit more fine than using a straight blade when I was doing some sewing repairs on my tent and some of my clothing. I also wanted to have a saw because I've been to camp to cut down little pieces of tinder and make sure that I have something to start a fire with. I've modified this a little bit by filing down the tip to make sure it was more like a flathead screwdriver because there's not one of those on here. And in addition to that, I've also modified the awl. So this was dull. I've sharpened this up to a sharp blade. I've also drilled some holes in it to try to lighten this tool up a little bit, and that was the reason for taking off that stake puller. Now inside, tucked in both of these, I have a ferro rod. No, try not to light my clothes on fire. So in emergencies, or even starting my camp stove without getting a lighter out, for emergencies is what I carry that one for. So that is my multi-tool and what I'll be taking. It is a significant amount different than the utility knife or multi-tool that I took. Another item I switched out was the Nikkor headlamp. So this was the original one that I took. It is very user-friendly, effective, USB charger, red light, high beams, low beams. Didn't have any problems with it, but it is a significant amount bigger than the Nightcore that I bought recently. And I took this on my hike to Katahdin last year. I still am not a big fan of the buttons and how that is either turned on or turned off, or how it switches to different modes. It does have a USB charger though, which I appreciate. I'll need the batteries and to fool around with those. So I never really ran into an issue having to charge this without with it running out. It never really ran out of juice, and I really haven't had an issue with this one either. So that brings me to my next piece of gear. So these are a significant difference in size and weight. And obviously these two are a significant difference in size and weight. I thought for sure, looking at and researching, that I would need a wall charger for all the items that I would have to charge. That would include my headlamp, my pump, so my FlexTail pump, my phone, the GoPro, and I never really found that I did have all these plugged in at one point just because I thought that was a necessity. But when you go to a hostel or end up in a hotel, there are multiple ports for you to plug your stuff into. So why carry this piece of item, which is a brick, when I could get just a simple wall charger that's a lot smaller? These are both Anker, with a quick charge attachment, and be able to charge two of the things and maybe plug something else in wherever else I was. So significant amount of difference in size and weight, and that is something that I wish I would have maybe considered a little bit further. And experience is worth its weight in gold. So now I know. The last couple items are my cook system. These are the stoves that I bought originally to go on my thru hike, and this is an Astro something from it's a pretty well-known stove, but I can't exactly remember the model. But I've only used this a couple times, and the idea was I was taking it with a big pot, a big gas canister, and that I would need this stove as well. It's got a self-igniter on it, but I thought this was a little bit too big and wanted to save some weight on that. So I ended up buying one of these on Amazon, and I believe it's called a Foxfire or Desert Fox stove. And this is actually what I did take on my thru hike. It is super small, but very effective. I didn't have any problems ever lighting it or getting to warm up my water and boil water, and it was effective. So I'm probably going to stick with that. The other couple of things that changed out in my cook system is I stopped carrying these large canisters. They are definitely cost effective. 230 grams of isobutane, and this is the smaller of the two, which is 110 grams. This is 3.88 ounces, and I'm not quite sure. You guys can comment down below if you know the weight of this one. But I think it says 230 grams of butane. But the weight itself, this is 10 grams. So I'm assuming this is double that. Okay. But I found myself not using all this, carrying it way too much longer than I needed to. And when I nestled things into this pot, I had some extra room for my stove to fit in there. And I did end up carrying a lot more of these. Now recently, I've gone to a smaller Tokes pot, which this can still nestle into. And this somewhat sits in there, not super well. And I can't necessarily put the top on it and keep it on there. But that is something that would be considerable amount of size difference and weight maybe not so much weight. And then my windscreens. This is the one that originally came that had all these panels on it. I ended up taking these 3 off so I could at least just get around here, and was able to light and kind of finagle and maneuver my pot if I needed to. I'm not so sure that I need the windscreen, but if I do, I thought that maybe just 3 might work, and especially on a smaller pot, that might be more effective. So still considering changing those out, but not really sure I need an excessively large stove. Now this pot's seen a lot of miles. I still boil my coffee and tea water on this every morning. I have tea every morning, some Earl Grey, and I just found that this works best on the stove. It's the perfect size, heats up fast, and that's something that I still use at home. So the very last 2 items are kind of my ditty bag, I guess you would call it. I originally packed this with my flex tail pump, my battery bank, which I still have from Anchor. I also put in my headlamp in here, and maybe my charging bank or my wall charger and some cords. I still have some earplugs in here for my hike, but this was a hardcover, and I was able to tuck it in my hip belt or in my side pockets, or even set it on the top of my pack for easy access. And wasn't quite sure. That's not waterproof. It didn't necessarily wet out, but I went to a Sea-to-Summit dry bag for kind of my electronics and all those things I used to carry. So a lot lighter. Not so sure that I like the flimsiness of it, but I mean, does that really matter? So that's where I'm going to be putting my electronics, my cords, which I'm still trying to figure out which ones I need, because some of them are multi-purpose and will fit different items, such as my phone and the headlamp, or the headlamp and the pump. So my small little ditty bag, and then I have this is a little bit heavier. It has a lot of different things in it. Right now I've included some repair kits, some tarp rope, and some other things into my med kit, and that's the last thing that I'd be carrying. So that kind of wraps some things up. I did switch out trekking poles halfway through my through hike. I was carrying some black diamonds that were steel or aluminum, and they think these are carbon fiber. Maybe not, but they're the Kumbu lights from Lucky. Did break one, which again, pull it fixed in Monson before I headed southbound.